Hey, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm Sam Sachs, and here are today's stories as told to me by a beached whale I rescued over the weekend. And we begin in Tehran, where panic has set in after the President of the United States called on everyone to evacuate the capital city, an indication there could be a rapid escalation in Israel's war on Iran, with the U.S. joining in on the attacks. For days now, Israel has been bombing Iran and targeting political and military officials and nuclear scientists for assassination. Iran has retaliated with missile strikes of its own. Many have slipped past Israel's Iron Dome defenses. There are numerous videos of missile strikes hitting downtown Tel Aviv. The U.S. is already heavily involved in the conflict, providing arms and intelligence to the Israeli military and helping to shoot down Iranian retaliatory strikes. But President Trump suggested the U.S. could become more active in the war, and an air fleet of refueling planes are en route to the region, along with an aircraft carrier and several other naval assets. President Trump posted on social media that he sees Israel's attacks on Iran as a way to get Tehran to submit in ongoing nuclear negotiations with Washington. Trump is pressuring Iran to completely give up its civilian nuclear energy program. Iran's leadership said it will never accept such maximalist demands from the U.S. The White House is reportedly considering using U.S. bombers to drop bunker-busting armaments on Iran to destroy enrichment facilities underground. But in Washington, some lawmakers are trying to prevent that. Senator Tim Kaine introduced a bill that would block the U.S. from getting involved in a war with Iran until Congress passes an authorization for it. Similarly, Senator Bernie Sanders put forward a bill that would block all federal funding toward a war with Iran until Congress passes that authorization. There's likely a sizable chunk of senators on both sides of the aisle willing to give President Trump that authorization to go to war with Iran. The likes of Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton, and John Fetterman. But do they have a majority? Well, there's only one way to find out. Senator Kaine's War Powers resolution is privileged, meaning he's guaranteed to force a vote on it. Earlier this week, Israel targeted Iran's state TV broadcaster, hitting the building while it was live on air. Shortly after, the station was back up and running again, with one journalist reporting from outside the burning news building. As Israel targets key infrastructure and senior political leadership in Iran, and Netanyahu floats the possibility of assassinating the Ayatollah, it's become clear this war is not just intended to disable the country's nuclear program, but also to bring about the collapse of its government. So, less than a half year into this term, and Trump has steered the U.S. directly in to a war of regime change once again. With focus on the volley of missiles between Iran and Israel, there's less attention on the genocide in Gaza, which is ongoing. Scores of Palestinians have been killed in Gaza by the Israeli military just since Monday. And that includes more than 30 people who were killed at an aid distribution center backed by the U.S. and Israel. Those centers have become sites of repeated massacres since they were rolled out earlier this month. Meanwhile, international workers are trying to do their part to jam up the Israeli war machine. Labor Notes published a report on unionized dock workers in Europe who've refused to load weapons intended for Israel. Earlier this month, it was France's CGT workers at the country's largest port in Marseille. Dock workers in Italy, Sweden, and several other countries have joined in the anti-genocide actions. This is from Labor Notes. Quote, blockades by dock workers stand out as one of the most concrete and disruptive forms of solidarity that workers can offer when governments refuse to act. Dockers are showing what it takes to build sustained resistance to war and oppression. Okay, now on to Trump's domestic war. The president ordered his Gestapo deportation forces to intensify efforts on cities run by Democrats. In a lengthy post on his social media site, the president lashed out at cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago that he alleged are impeding his goal to deliver the, quote, single largest mass deportation program in history. He called these cities the core of the Democratic power center and absurdly claimed it's where immigrants are being used to steal elections and take public benefits. Trump wrote, quote, that is why I want ICE, Border Patrol, and our great and patriotic law enforcement officers to focus on our crime-ridden and deadly inner cities and those places where sanctuary cities play such a big role. The aggressive posting comes after Trump briefly acknowledged the damage the deportations are having on certain sectors of the economy that rely on immigrant labor. He said last week he had instructed ICE to back off raids targeting the agricultural and hotel and leisure industries. So, trying to reconcile both these statements, it would appear the White House's position is that certain immigrant workers are safe from deportation, but only if they don't live in a city governed by a Democrat. And finally, more news related to the White House. Trump's adult fail sons unveiled another scheme to profit off their dad's presidency. Eric and Donald Jr. announced the creation of a cell phone and services company called Trump Mobile. The notorious hucksters said they would be rolling out a 5G cellular phone service, complete with offerings like telemedicine and roadside assistance, with no contract for $47.45 a month. That's a reference to Trump being the 45th and 47th president of the United States. Don Jr. said in a statement, quote, Trump Mobile is going to change the game. We're building on the movement to put America first, and we will deliver the highest levels of quality and service. Right. Just like Trump Steaks did and Trump University. Eric Trump said Americans deserve a mobile service that, quote, reflects their values. Whatever that means. Does Trump Mobile offer an option for users to block all incoming calls from non-white people or something? Trump Mobile will also be releasing a new phone, too, called the T1, described as a, quote, sleek gold smartphone. Phone company is just the latest in a number of blatant attempts to profit off the White House. Don Jr. is also involved in starting an exclusive social club in D.C. called the Executive Branch, in which he plans to sell access to high-level members of his dad's administration for a high membership fee. That's all, in addition to the two Trump sons profiting off their dad's meme coin and getting involved in various crypto ventures that just so happen to be aided by the administration's early policymaking. This is all just blatant corruption. A suspect is in custody after the shooting of two Democratic state lawmakers in Minnesota over the weekend. Police believe Vance Bolter is the man who dressed up like a cop and targeted the homes of Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and State Senator John Hoffman, shooting both lawmakers and their spouses. Speaker Hortman and her husband were killed. Senator Hoffman and his wife were both injured. Authorities say they recovered notebooks from the suspect's vehicle that included plans and a hit list with dozens of names, including other lawmakers and also abortion supporters. An investigation into motive is underway. According to the FBI, Bolter visited the homes of 2 other state lawmakers that night. One wasn't home, and he left the scene of the other lawmaker's home after police arrived there to do a welfare check following the shooting of Senator Hoffman. In fact, the FBI's account is that on 2 occasions before Bolter was alleged to have killed Speaker Hortman and her husband, local police officers encountered him and were actually fooled by his police disguise and did not apprehend him. Right-wing misinformation mongers immediately tried to cast the shootings as an act of left-wing political violence, even though both targets were Democrats. Bolter was once appointed to a non-political position on an obscure state workforce development board by Governor Walz back in 2019. But according to Bolter's best friend and roommate, he was not a Democrat, and in fact, he was a Trump supporter. Here's the roommate being interviewed by reporters.
Well, everyone's calling him a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. He would be offended if people called him a Democrat. So,
Any politicians he mentioned?
well, gee, you mentioned Nancy Pelosi. They didn't like Jim Walz.
Jim Walz?
They didn't like Jim Biden. But
Tim Walz? What would you say about him?
well, I mean, nothing. I mean, it's just normal. Oh, I don't like this, that Tim Walz did this. I don't like that they did that.
And did he listen to any particular podcasts or TV shows or anything online that concerns you?
Well, you listen to InfoWars.
Did he talk much about Trump? And what did he say if so?
I was a Trump supporter. Voted for Trump. Do you like Trump?
So despite zero evidence that Bolter was motivated by left-wing political beliefs, and in fact evidence existing to the contrary, a sitting United States senator claimed that this was an act of Marxist violence. Senator Mike Lee of Utah tweeted a picture of the shooter, captured by one of the victim's front door cameras. You can see the shooter wearing a police uniform and a hyper-realistic latex mask. Lee posted, quote, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way." You know, you really shouldn't just be able to say nonsense like that. But since senators aren't nearly as afraid as they should be of getting picked up and put in a dumpster, they feel comfortable posting that garbage. In another tweet, Senator Lee implied this was somehow the work of Governor Walz. He again shared the picture of the shooter, writing, quote, "Nightmare on Waltz Street." Yeah, you misspelled the governor's name, dummy. By the way, all these tweets were sent from Lee's personal Twitter account, which goes by the handle Based Mike Lee. As the U.S. enters its own version of the years of lead, nice to see U.S. Senator Mike Lee focused on what matters most, being based as hell. I'm actually surprised the senator would share an image of the Minnesota shooter, because looking again at that mask, it does seem pretty obvious to me. The guy was wearing a Mike Lee mask. Yeah, that must be awkward for you, you prick. Two more major defense contractors won in on the heist of public dollars known as the Golden Dome Missile Defense System. Trump's fantasy of a space missile platform could end up being one of the most costly Pentagon programs ever, which will make a lot of people in the war profiteering industry very wealthy. In just its first few years of development, it's expected to cost $175 billion, at least. Reuters reported from the Paris Air Show that both Lockheed Martin and Boeing are trying to find a spot at the trough. Tim Cahill, the president of Missiles and Fire Control at Lockheed Martin, was pitching his company's services. Quote, "We clearly have a whole number of product lines that will contribute very well, that are going to fit very well with what is necessary to achieve the mission," he said, according to the wire service, referring to missiles and interceptors that could be installed in the envisioned Golden Dome system. The joint venture between SpaceX and Palantir reportedly had the inside track to secure a large portion of the Golden Dome contract, but that was before Elon Musk called the president a pedophile. So, who knows now? Now on to more news involving Boeing. An investigation is underway into what caused yet another deadly crash involving an airplane made by the company. The Air India Dreamliner 787 took off from Ahmedabad en route to London, but it struggled to gain altitude and fell from the sky within a minute, killing all 242 people aboard, except for one lone survivor. Plane crashed into a medical college on the ground, where nearly 50 more people died. Engine failure is suspected. The plane's black box and cockpit voice recorder have been recovered. Boeing said it was gathering information on the crash. But it already received a lot of information about its Dreamliner planes, warnings, I should say, that were ignored or suppressed, including from Boeing whistleblower John Barnett, who was found dead in his truck from an alleged suicide last March while he was in South Carolina being deposed in a lawsuit against the company. As the American Prospect reported, Barnett and other engineers raised several concerns about the production of the 787 Dreamliner over the years, mainly due to cutting corners to maximize profits. Last year, Boeing engineer turned whistleblower Sam Salihpour testified to Congress that parts of the plane were being improperly aligned during assembly, which could increase stress over time and lead to failure. Boeing was previously sued by a Norwegian airliner over repeated engine failures on its fleet of 787 planes. Two people, quote, deeply familiar with a plant in Charleston where parts of the 787 are made, told the Prospect they had particular quality concerns over planes that were delivered to Air India. Last month, Boeing struck a deal with the U.S. Justice Department to avoid prosecution over two other air disasters involving planes that crashed due to the company's focus on profit-seeking instead of safety. The world's most famous museum was shut down on Monday as workers refused to labor under unsafe conditions. Staff at the Louvre in Paris are protesting unmanageable crowds and chronic understaffing. The strike prevented tourists from catching a glimpse of the Mona Lisa, one of the most prominent artworks displayed at the museum. The strike involved ticket agents, security guards, and gallery attendants. Nearly 9 million people visit the Louvre every year, which is about double what the museum was built to accommodate. And that's forced workers there to endure daily hardships to deal with the crowds, including limited breaks and rising indoor temperatures from the masses of humans flocking into the galleries. French government is pursuing a renovation plan for the museum to ease some of the burdens, but overall federal funding for the Louvre has dried up, exacerbating the problem for workers. The strike at the Louvre corresponded with a broader wave of discontent across Europe aimed at tourism. Residents say over-reliance on tourism has led to rising costs of living and the destruction of small businesses. And there have been anti-tourism protests in Spain, Italy, and Portugal. Over the weekend in Barcelona, protesters doused tourists with water cannons. All right, friends, the show ends today with a sunrise from New Jersey. It was sent in by David and Melanie in Asbury Park. Enjoy. Thanks, David. Thanks, Melanie. That's the show. Thanks for watching. And thanks to the team behind the scenes. Find more MMN at means.tv. We also have a YouTube and podcast channel, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. One day, capitalism will fall. Until then, we'll be right here. See you tomorrow.